I run through the cold, white corridors of the hospital, feeling the light but urgent weight of Maya's body in my arms. My mind is confused, and my heart beats faster than my steps. I hear my own breathing echoing, interrupted by desperation. "Please, someone help me." My voice comes out hoarse, almost like a scream. The sound reverberates in the corridors that until then had been silent. I see some heads turn in my direction, curious eyes that soon mix with looks of astonishment. I look at Maya's face, so small, so fragile, and I feel a tightness in my chest that almost makes me stop running. She can't open her eyes completely, but I can feel the pain written all over her face. That face. It looks so young and innocent, and that's what makes everything even more unbearable. Her belly jumps against the thin fabric of her dress, a cruel contrast that seems to make no sense with the childish image she projects. And it's this appearance that makes the looks of the people around me become more suspicious, more inquisitive. My legs are shaking, but I force myself to keep going, to ignore the murmurs that now seem to fill the room. I can't stop. I can't leave her like this. "Doctor, nurse, please." I feel my voice crack as I try to make myself heard. And for the first time, someone finally appears. A group of nurses rush toward me, their gazes alternating between Maya and me, clearly shocked. I can't think of anything else but her pain and the overwhelming fear that is upon me. The nurse who approaches seems to hesitate for a moment, her eyes alternating between Maya's pale expression and my distraught face. She pauses, taking a deep breath, and with a tone of professionalism broken by curiosity, she asks, "What happened here?" Her voice sounds calm, but I detect a hint of distrust. I find myself forced to answer quickly, between gasps and an anguish that threatens to suffocate me. She needs help. Now. I try to sound firm, but my voice cracks as I look at Maya, barely conscious in my arms. "Please, she's in labor." The nurse frowns, her eyes a mix of shock and disbelief. I can see the shock in her eyes. Like me, she seems in disbelief at what she's just heard. People around me move a little closer, forming a circle of curiosity and amazement. I can feel their eyes piercing my skin, and the tension between me and the strangers in the hospital begins to grow. Immediately, we need a stretcher at the main entrance. The nurse recovers and acts quickly, speaking into the intercom system. Her face remains focused, but her expression is visibly troubled. As we wait for the stretcher, she approaches Maya, touching her forehead and murmuring something gentle, almost as if to comfort her. I can see her hand trembling slightly as it caresses the girl's face. "Hold on, honey. We're going to help you." The nurse murmurs softly, but her eyes, filled with silent indignation, flip to me for a second. Like a spark that doesn't take long to spread, I notice the expressions around me change. People's astonishment begins to turn into silent judgment, into obvious disapproval. I try to ignore it, but it's as if each look is an invisible blade, cutting deep. Finally, the stretcher arrives, and I carefully place it on the hard mattress. The nurses organize themselves around Maya, and for a moment, I feel a brief relief. But when I try to follow them, one of them reaches out, stopping me. "I'm sorry, sir, but you need to stay here," she says firmly, with a touch of compassion in her eyes. "But she needs me." I try to argue, but my voice comes out weak, choked by the situation. "We'll take care of her," she replies, and I feel like the words are more of a barrier than a comfort. I realize that as they lead Maya away, the murmurs around me become louder and louder. The people around me seem to be united in a silent judgment, and I feel trapped in the center of an invisible court. My chest tightens at the thought that I no longer have control. neither over what they say, nor over Maya's fate. As the nurses disappear with Maya down the halls, the whispers around me become clearer and clearer, turning into direct comments, full of distrust and disgust. I try to ignore them, to focus on my breathing and the rapid rhythm of my heart, but the cutting words are impossible to avoid. "That girl can't be more than 10 years old," I hear a woman whisper to the man next to her, his eyes wide with disbelief. The man shakes his head with an expression of disgust. "And the guy with her? I bet he's responsible," someone else murmurs, the tone of disapproval growing more evident. I look around, feeling a wave of despair grow. The people around me, complete strangers, begin to construct a narrative, a sentence without even understanding the truth. I want to scream, to explain that things are not what they seem, that there is a story behind this chaotic moment. But words fail me, and all I can do is lower my head, trying to block out the stares and silent accusations. How could someone do something so monstrous? A woman murmurs, her face pale with indignation. And like a spark in a dry field, the atmosphere in the hospital becomes heavy, saturated with revulsion and judgments that surround me from all sides. I feel my hands trembling, my stomach churning. I try to isolate myself from these condemning looks, but it is impossible. I sit in a corner of the hallway, my head in my hands, feeling the weight of the accusations around me, like a wall that closes in ever closer. Suddenly, a male voice, full of authority, rises above the murmur. "That guy shouldn't be out," someone shouts, and a wave of indignation runs through the room. The heat of the accusations increases, and my heart seems to freeze. "Let's call the police. Someone needs to do something," a young woman says, her voice raised. My stomach turns and I close my eyes, trying desperately to find some peace amidst the chaos that surrounds me. I know that with each passing second, more people turn against me, more judgments are thrown, without me having any chance to explain myself. I feel a chill run down my spine as a man approaches me, his face distorted with rage. "You're a monster," he mutters with contempt, and I shrink back, not knowing what to do, without words to argue, without the strength to fight this avalanche of judgments. All I can do is wait. Wait and pray that Maya's okay, and that somehow the truth will finally come out. Suddenly, I feel a dark shadow approaching where I'm sitting. I look up and see a tall, strong man, his face red with rage, advancing towards me. He doesn't say anything at first, but the look in his eyes is pure hatred. I feel a chill run through my body, but I'm too exhausted to react, to try to defend myself. I just raise my hands, almost as a reflex, in an instinctive gesture of surrender. He stops in front of me, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, and then, without warning, he grabs my collar and pulls me up, almost lifting me off the ground. "You bastard!" he shouts, his voice filled with a fury that seems to come from deep within. "How could you do this to a child? How can you sleep at night?" I feel his face close to mine, the hot, acidic breath of someone overcome by indignation. I try to speak, but my voice falters, blocked by the pressure he exerts on my shirt and the rising panic. "Wait, you don't understand," I stammer, my voice shaking. But he doesn't want to hear it. There's no room for explanations. His eyes are cold, judgmental, and he squeezes me even tighter, as if he can force the truth out of me. "There's nothing to understand," he shouts, almost spitting the words. "You're a monster, and you'll pay for what you did." My legs feel weak, my desperation growing with his firm grip on my collar, and for a second, everything feels out of control. Before I can react, a nurse appears from across the hall, running toward us. She tries to intervene, putting her body between us, her hands outstretched in a desperate attempt to stop the assault. "Please, sir, let him go," she begs, her voice wavering between authority and nervousness. "We've already called the police. They'll take care of this." The man finally releases me with a shove, and I fall back into the chair, breathing heavily, trying to put together what's left of me. The nurse crouches down beside me, making sure I'm okay, while the man walks away, still giving me a look of pure contempt. "They'll sort it out," the nurse repeats, this time looking at me. But there's no comfort in her voice. I don't know if she wants to reassure me or just avoid more confusion. I take a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but it's impossible. The stares continue, the murmurs continue, and now I'm sure that no one here is willing to listen to me or believe my version of events. I'm alone, trapped in the midst of these judgments, while in the back of my mind, all I can think about is Maya. How she must be in there, alone, needing help. And here I am, helpless, at the mercy of a mob that has already condemned me. Suddenly, I see two police officers entering the hallway, responding to the calls that the mob has made. They look around, and then approach me, their expressions serious and controlled. One of them puts a firm but not aggressive hand on my shoulder and says, "Sir, we need you to come with us." "But Maya, she needs two of me." My voice is weak, but they don't hesitate. The other police officer looks at me seriously. "We're going to investigate what's happening here. We need you to come and clarify some details." I stare at them for a moment, feeling the weight of each word, the feeling that everything is slipping out of my control. My legs tremble as I stand up, and the murmurs around me continue, like an invisible sentence. I look one last time at the hallway where they took Maya, knowing that there's nothing else I can do but follow the police officers. With a heavy heart and a mind full of worries, I take my steps hesitantly, feeling each look and each unspoken word, like invisible knives digging deep. The silence of the police officers beside me is confirmation that, at least for now, I'm completely at the mercy of others, and that perhaps the truth will take a while to come out. At the police station, I was taken to a cold, impersonal room, where the only furniture was a metal table and two uncomfortable chairs. The gray walls and fluorescent lights buzz uncomfortably, heightening the sense of isolation and desperation. I feel the handcuffs on my wrists, and the cold metal against my skin only makes me realize how vulnerable, helpless, and defenseless I am. A detective enters the room, followed by a woman with a stern, measured expression. She sits across from me, opening a thick file that she places on the table with an almost disturbing calm. "I'm Detective Sophia," she says, her tone firm and direct. "And this is Detective Gonzalez." The man next to her regards me with a suspicious gaze, his arms crossed, as if he's already formed an opinion before even hearing what I have to say. "We've received complaints," Sophia continues, her voice firm and professional, but with a hint of something more, skepticism perhaps. "The witnesses at the hospital said that you committed an extremely serious act. We want to hear your version of events." I try to calm myself, taking deep breaths, but the pressure is overwhelming. I can feel the weight of judgment in their eyes, and I know that every word I say here will be scrutinized. Still, I try to begin, my voice shaky but determined. "Maya, she's not a child," I begin, trying to remain calm despite the tension. "She's my English teacher. She's 27, but she has a condition, a rare condition that makes her look younger." Detective Gonzalez raises an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. He exchanges a quick glance with Sophia, as if listening to some excuse. Their disbelief is evident, and it only adds to the weight of the situation. She has a condition called hypopituitarism, I explain with difficulty, trying to keep my voice steady. It's a disease that prevents normal physical development. She looks like a child, but inside, she's a grown woman. The two detectives look at each other, and I can see that they're not convinced. To them, my explanation sounds absurd, a desperate attempt to justify the unjustifiable. "You expect us to believe that?" Detective Gonzalez asks, his voice thick with suspicion. "It seems a little too convenient, doesn't it?" I'm not lying," I reply, barely above a whisper. "You just have to wait until she wakes up. She can explain everything. I've seen the medical records. The diagnosis? That's not an excuse." Detective Sophia leans forward, her gaze growing more severe, almost as if she's searching for some flaw, some sign of guilt. "Why hasn't anyone else heard of this condition? Why doesn't anyone seem to know about this story besides you?" Her words hit like a blow. I feel despair growing, a suffocating sense of helplessness that makes me want to scream. No matter how much I try to explain, the words feel hollow, insufficient to convince someone who's already decided not to believe. Suddenly, the door to the room opens, and a man walks in. He has a determined bearing, carrying a briefcase in his hands and a resolute expression. He sets the briefcase on the table and introduces himself firmly. "I'm his lawyer," he says, looking directly at the detectives. "I demand to speak to my client in private." Reluctantly, Sophia and Gonzalez exchange glances and leave the room, leaving me alone with the lawyer. He sits across from me, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "Pablo, I've spoken to the doctors who are treating Maya," he says, his voice calm but grave. "She's fine. She's trying to work things out. But you need to stay calm. Trust that we'll get this all sorted out." I feel a small wave of relief, a glimmer of hope that emerges amidst the chaos. I nod, almost voiceless, but with a slight comfort in knowing that at least someone is on my side. "This is a terrible misunderstanding," I murmur, more to myself than to him. "I know," he says firmly, "but we need to prove it with evidence. I'm working on getting Maya's medical records and getting in touch with her doctor." Before we can say more, the detectives return to the room, and the lawyer stands up, facing them with a firm stance. "These are preliminary documents that prove Maya's condition," he says, handing the folder to Sophia. She takes it and begins to leaf through the papers carefully, while Gonzalez watches, still skeptical. "This is just the beginning," he says, addressing the detectives in a firm voice. "We will verify every detail. Until then, my client should not be detained." Gonzalez crosses his arms, his expression grim. "That still needs to be confirmed. Until we have more evidence, he will remain in our custody." I feel the ground give way beneath my feet. Any hope that had momentarily arisen seems to disappear. I try to argue, but the words die in my throat. All I can do is look at the lawyer, who gives me an encouraging look despite the tension. The next few hours are a silent torture, an endless wait in a cold cell where the minutes seem to drag on. Each second is filled with the sound of my own thoughts, memories of Maya, and the terrible uncertainty that threatens to consume me. In that cold cell, time seems to drag on in slow motion. Each minute is a torture of uncertainty, a constant echo of accusations and looks of contempt that I already knew were spreading through the minds of everyone who saw me in that position. I sat in the far corner, trying to calm my thoughts, but it was useless. My head was spinning between images of Maya alone in the hospital and the suffocating feeling of helplessness. Finally, the door opened, and I saw my lawyer enter, this time with a more serious expression. He approached slowly, sitting across from me while I looked at him, trying to read any sign of hope in his face. "Pablo," he began, his voice strained as if he were trying to choose the right words. "We have managed to contact Maya's doctors, and we have confirmation of her condition. The records are being reviewed, and the hospital is willing to share the information." I felt a small wave of relief wash over me, but he continued before I could react. "But the detectives are still skeptical," he said with a sigh. "They're going to need more evidence, especially in a case like this. The suspicions that have been raised. Pablo, you're in a tricky situation. They want a straight explanation, proof that leaves no doubt." I nodded, trying to absorb every word, but still unable to shake the feeling that I was in a trap that would be difficult to escape. "What else do they need?" "Maya. She'll be able to talk soon, right?" My lawyer nodded. "Yes. Her condition is real and unusual, and the records prove it. But public opinion, the judgment of those who saw it all, they still weigh against you. We need Maya to be conscious enough to testify." I stayed silent, feeling a mix of frustration and anxiety. Her image remained clear in my mind, her face pale with pain, her expression fragile and vulnerable. I needed her to be okay, not just to help me, but to prove that everything I'd said was true. A few minutes later, Detective Gonzalez walked into the cell, interrupting our conversation. He gave me a cold, impassive look, but his posture indicated that something had changed. "Mr. Pablo," he said, almost reluctantly, "we've received an update from the hospital. Your story is starting to make more sense. Partially." My heart skipped a beat at that, a spark of hope igniting again. "Maya woke up a little while ago and confirmed her condition," he continued, his face impassive. "She also mentioned you. Said you were just a student who helped her when things got out of hand." My chest filled with relief for a moment, but the detective quickly reminded me of the gravity of the situation. "However, this is still an unusual case. We need a full review of her medical records and her history. You will be released for now, but you are not to leave the city until all investigations are complete." I nodded, barely able to speak. The combination of relief and fear left me dizzy, but all that mattered was that I would finally get to see her, to know that she was okay. The lawyer accompanied me to the hospital, where the tension in the air was palpable. When I arrived at the recovery ward, I saw Maya's pale face, still fragile, but her eyes open and full of tears when she saw me. Beside her, the tiny baby she had brought into the world lay on a white blanket, breathing softly and peacefully. I approached her carefully, my heart heavy, and she smiled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Pablo," she whispered, her voice weak but clear, filled with emotion. "Maya, I'm so sorry for everything. I tried my best, but..." She shook her head, a tear rolling down her cheek. "You did more than anyone could. You saved my life and his," she said, looking down at the baby. "I don't know how to thank you." I knelt beside her, taking her hand gently. "I just want you to be okay, for this to be over." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the same longing. The door to the room opened, and the doctor in charge came in, holding a folder of documents and looking at us with a sympathetic expression. "Maya, Pablo," he began, his voice soft. "We're working to get this straightened out. Your medical records are being processed and forwarded to the authorities, and soon, this whole mess will be resolved." Relief washed over me, and Maya squeezed my hand, a silent gesture of reassurance. For a brief moment, all the judgments, the condemning looks, and the accusations disappeared. There, With her and the little baby by my side, everything seemed calmer. But I knew that the fight to be ours, prove our innocence, was not over yet. But at least it would not be alone. As we stood there, in a rare moment of calm, Dr. Guadalupe, who was in charge of Maya's case, continued to explain the next steps in the process. His voice was low but serious. "Maya, your case is unique. The records about your rare condition of hypopituitarism are being reviewed and attached to your medical records. This material will be essential for everyone to understand what really happened. The charges against Pablo have not yet been officially dropped, but that should change as the investigation progresses." Maya nodded, her eyes fixed on the doctor. I could see that she was struggling to maintain her composure, her face still marked by the fatigue and pain of the last few hours. She held my hand tighter, and I squeezed back, trying to give her some strength. "Doctor," I began, feeling like I could finally express what had been suffocating me. "All of this situation, it's as if the whole world had condemned me without even hearing the truth. How could something like this be allowed?" He sighed, looking genuinely compassionate. "Unfortunately, Pablo, it's the weight of prejudice. The situation you've faced is unusual and defies immediate understanding. People are quick to judge, especially when fear and ignorance are the main triggers." I looked at Maya, who was now watching the sleeping baby in her arms. That little life was proof that even in the midst of chaos and misunderstanding, something good had emerged. A silent miracle, a symbol of hope, even in the face of so much doubt. Suddenly, the bedroom door opened, and Detectives Sofia and Gonzalez entered, accompanied by their lawyer. Their faces were more neutral, less accusatory than the last time we'd seen each other. They stood beside the bed, and Sofia gave Maya a slight nod, an almost respectful gesture. "Maya," she began, her voice less cold than before, "we have received the medical documents and spoken with your doctor. We know that your condition is genuine, that it justifies the unusual situation we witnessed." Maya nodded, her gaze steady. "I hope you now understand that Pablo was not to blame at all. He helped me when I needed it most, without hesitation. He was the one who saved me." The detectives exchanged glances, and Gonzalez, with a more serious expression, finally spoke. "Indeed, we have more clarity on this now. We will continue with the case to confirm all the details, but we believe that Pablo acted in good faith." I felt the weight of a mountain lift off my shoulders. The truth was finally beginning to emerge, and justice seemed closer than ever. As the detectives left, the lawyer approached me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You have been through a real nightmare, Pablo, but things are moving towards the truth." Maya looked at me, a slight smile appearing on her face. "Everything will be okay, Pablo. We did it together." I sighed deeply, still taking it all in. The nightmare was almost over, and the sense of relief was overwhelming. As I watched Maya and the baby in her arms, I knew that something much bigger had revealed itself in that hospital. I hadn't just helped save a life, I had found something worth fighting for with every fiber of my being. Standing there, with my hand in hers, I felt like everything we had endured had made us stronger. Any external judgment seemed insignificant now. The truth had prevailed, and with it, the hope of a new beginning for the three of us. A few days had passed since the chaos at the hospital began to dissipate. The charges had finally been dropped, and I could visit Maya without restrictions, without the suspicious looks or muttered judgments. Every visit to the hospital was I had the opportunity to sit next to her, talk about anything, and watch as she slowly recovered, gaining strength again. That morning, I walked into Maya's room, with a renewed sense of relief. She was sitting on the bed, holding the baby carefully, and her eyes lit up when she saw me enter. A soft smile appeared on her face, the kind of smile you only see on someone who has been through so much and yet found a way to keep hope. "Pablo," she began, her voice still weak but full of tenderness. "With each passing day, I realize how much of a support you have been to me, even when all seemed lost." I walked over to the bed and sat down next to her, looking at the tiny baby sleeping in her arms. "Maya, I only did what anyone should do. You have gotten through all of this with a strength that no one can imagine. If anyone here is an inspiration, it is you." She looked at me, a single tear running down her face, and I knew that every word we had said up until that moment had been sincere. I held her hand, feeling the warmth of it, and we sat in silence for a few moments, enjoying the peace that had finally arrived. Suddenly the door opened, and a nurse came in, carrying a small tray of food. With a warm smile, she placed it next to Maya. "Today we have oatmeal, orange juice, and fresh fruit," the nurse said, adjusting Maya's pillow so she was more comfortable. "And I have to say, everyone here is rooting for you to recover soon. Your story has touched us deeply." Maya smiled at the nurse, and I realized that it wasn't just the love she and the baby had earned. It was the respect and admiration of the entire staff, who now saw her as much more than a patient. After the nurse left, Maya looked at me with an expression of deep gratitude. "It's amazing how things can change, isn't it? I've been through so much fear, so much judgment. But now, everything seems so different." I nodded, still holding her hand. "People judge without knowing it, Maya. But the truth always comes out, no matter how tortuous the path." We spent the rest of the morning talking about the future, about the possibilities, and about how we would adapt to the new life that awaited us. Each word felt like a step away from the nightmare we had faced. And as the sun set that afternoon, I left the hospital with a light heart. I knew there were still challenges ahead, but now, with Maya and the little baby who was starting his life, I was ready to face anything. We knew that together we were strong, and that regardless of external judgments, what we had built there was a true, indestructible bond. Maya and I's story, full of pain, judgment, and overcoming, was now a testament to everyone around us. And as I walked out of the hospital that night, I felt for the first time at peace. The day had finally arrived. After weeks in the hospital, Maya was ready to go home. The news was a source of joy for everyone around us, especially for the medical team, who had been with us every step of the way during our recovery. But for me, it was a mix of emotions: relief, hope, and a twinge of uncertainty about what our lives would be like outside those walls. I arrived at the hospital early that morning, eager to help Maya with the final preparations. When I entered the room, I found her already dressed, holding the baby in her arms, with a tender and determined look on her face. "Ready to start a new phase?" I asked, trying to hide the emotion that threatened to overflow. She smiled, that smile that I already knew so well, full of gratitude and strength. "Yes, Pablo. Ready to leave the past behind and start over." Nurse Sophia appeared at the door, pushing a wheelchair toward the exit. "This is the special moment, isn't it?" she said with a loving look. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Maya. It was a privilege to take care of you." Maya thanked me, with tears in her eyes, and sat in the wheelchair, carefully placing the baby on her lap. I pushed her toward the hospital exit as nurses and doctors waved, wishing her well and offering genuine smiles. It seemed that despite all the initial turmoil, our story had touched each of these people in a special way. As we walked out the front door, a group of reporters and photographers were waiting outside. The story of Maya and the baby had already spread, and although we knew the attention wouldn't come easy, it was an opportunity for us to show the world the truth, our truth. "Maya, Pablo, how does it feel to be going home?" one of the reporters shouted, holding the microphone out toward us. Maya looked at me, and I could see that despite her nervousness, she was happy, ready to face the world with us. She took a deep breath before answering, her voice firm and full of emotion. "We feel blessed and grateful," she said, looking down at the baby in her arms. "The love and support we received gave us the strength to overcome everything. I hope our story inspires people to judge less and understand more, especially when it comes to situations that defy the ordinary." The reporter nodded, catching every word, and others approached, wanting to know more about our experience. I felt my hand tremble for a moment, but Maya squeezed my arm, a silent gesture that gave me the courage to speak too. "Our journey was difficult," I began, facing the crowd, "but every moment was worth it. What we learned is that, regardless of adversity and judgment, what really matters is the love and commitment we have for each other." The questions continued for a few minutes, but we kept the focus on the message of hope and resilience. Finally, with one last look, Maya and I decided it was time to head home, leaving behind the weight of the accusations and embracing what really mattered. As we walked to the car, the sun was shining brightly, casting a soft light on us, almost like a promise of a new beginning. I helped Maya settle in, and she held the baby carefully, her eyes shining with a mixture of joy and relief. On the way, we were silent, but it was a comfortable silence, full of meanings that didn't need to be said out loud. After so many hardships, we finally had the chance to start a new phase, to build our lives without the weight of other people's judgment. When we got home, I opened the door and felt a wave of peace engulf us. This was our new life, our space, where we could be ourselves, where Maya could fully recover, and our baby could grow surrounded by love and understanding. That night, as we watched the baby sleep in his crib, Maya held my hand and said softly, "Thank you for never giving up on me, Pablo." I looked into her eyes and smiled, feeling the weight of all our experiences melt away. There was never another option, Maya. The only thing that matters is that we are together, and from now on, that is what we will do. Together, without looking back. We hugged each other silently, knowing that what we had faced had brought us together in a way that nothing else could tear us apart. The story of our struggle and our overcoming was no longer just a tale of suffering. It was, above all, a celebration of the love, hope, and strength we had found in each other. We closed our eyes, finally at peace, ready for whatever the future brought, knowing that together we could overcome anything. The days that followed our return home were filled with discovery and adjustment. Everything seemed a little brighter, as if each moment was a chance to appreciate the new phase we were finally building together. Maya spent most of her time caring for the baby, and I dedicated myself to making our home a place where she could recover and find the peace she deserved. One afternoon, as I was making tea in the kitchen, I heard Maya's soft laughter coming from the nursery. Curious, I walked over and found her sitting next to the crib, watching our son with a sparkle in her eyes that I had never seen before. The scene moved me deeply, and I stood there for a moment, taking in the simplicity and beauty of that moment. When she noticed me, Maya looked up and smiled. "He's the reason we got through all this, Pablo. It was worth it, wasn't it?" I just nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. I knew she was right. What we had been through had been painful, But somehow every obstacle had led us to this very moment. It was worth it, Maya, more than I can put into words. She stood up, walked over to me, and took my hand with that soft, sincere touch that only she could muster. I want you to know that I will never forget what you did for me. Your courage and patience saved my life and the life of our son. I felt a deep warmth in my chest and hugged her. In the silence of the room, the quiet sound of the baby's breathing filled the air, and I knew in that moment that our union was much more than a story of overcoming difficulties. It was a promise that we would always fight for each other, no matter what the world said or what difficulties arose. That night, after putting the baby to sleep, we sat on the porch under the starry sky, enjoying the gentle breeze. It was as if the nature around us was also at peace, just like us. Maya, wrapped in a light blanket, snuggled up next to me, and we stayed there, without saying a word, just enjoying each other's company. After a long silence, she murmured, "Pablo, I thought I would never be able to trust anyone again. But you showed me that there is still kindness, that there is still true love." I caressed her face, feeling the soft texture of her skin and the warmth that radiated from her gaze. "Maya, you are the strongest person I know, and I will be by your side every step of the way, every fight. No matter what happens, you will always have me and our family." She smiled, a serene expression that said more than any words. And there, under the night sky, we knew that our future was a blank page, ready to be filled with moments of peace, love, and purpose. In the days that followed, each new dawn was a reminder that we had overcome together. And so, we built our routine, our days of simplicity and love, anchored in the silent commitment to always be there for each other. We knew that the outside world could continue to judge, but that was irrelevant now. What mattered was the unwavering love we felt and the home we finally called our own. Here, in our new life, the past was truly behind us, and the future was full of possibilities. The story we began to write was a celebration of something that outweighed hardship, a deep and eternal bond made of trust, respect, and love. A few months had passed since that peaceful moment on the porch, and our life had settled into a comfortable routine. The baby was growing quickly, and each new smile, each small gesture, was a reminder of the miracle he represented. Maya and I were finally adapting to this new phase, where the marks of the past, although still present, no longer defined us. They were just memories of a difficult journey that had brought us to where we were now. That morning, as I was making coffee, Maya came into the kitchen with the baby in her arms, who was observing everything around her with his big, curious eyes. She approached me, and I greeted her with a soft kiss on the forehead, feeling the warmth of our complicity, built brick by brick. "I was wondering," she began hesitantly, rocking the baby gently. "I wonder, is it time we started telling our story? Not as a plea for forgiveness, but as a lesson, something that might help other people understand the importance of empathy, of not being so quick to judge." I stared at her for a moment, surprised by the idea. Maya had always been reserved, and since all this trouble had happened, we had both opted for silence, for seclusion. But seeing her talk about it now, I realized that she carried a strength that perhaps even she herself didn't know she had. She wanted to transform our pain into something bigger, into a message. "Are you sure?" I asked, wanting to make sure she understood the weight of what she was proposing. She nodded, with a slight but determined smile. "Yes, Pablo. I think that, in some way, our story can touch other people. I want them to know what we went through, to understand the impact of words and judgments. I think that's important. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of pride and apprehension. She was right. Our suffering, our resilience, could all be an inspiration to those who, like us, have been victims of misunderstandings and hasty judgments. If sharing our experience could prevent others from going through the same, then perhaps it was worth it. We spent the next few weeks planning how we would tell our story. We decided to do it carefully, in short videos, where we would talk about each part, from the beginning when we met, to the hospital, and the hasty judgments we faced. Our idea was not to point fingers, but rather to open a conversation about empathy and understanding. In the first video, Maya spoke about her rare condition, explaining how hypopituitarism affected her body, making her seem like a child to others, but without changing the age she carried inside. Her speech was soft, full of sincerity, and I found myself right there with her, moved by the courage she demonstrated. We received many messages of support, people who were moved by our story, who apologized for having made wrong judgments when they read the first headlines when the case was reported. And little by little, our message began to spread. Maya began to receive invitations to speak about her condition, to share her experience with others. I accompanied her to every event, to every interview, knowing that finally, the world was beginning to see who she really was. A strong, courageous woman who transformed pain into learning and fear into purpose. Little by little, our lives changed again. But this time, what we saw around us was no longer the weight of a judgment, but the warmth of support and understanding. We realized that our story was not just about overcoming personal. She became a beacon for those who needed hope, a reminder that true love can survive the greatest storms. And at the end of it all, we always came home, where it was just the three of us, where the simplicity of our home reminded us that the most important thing was already there. In the eyes of our son, in the smiles we shared, and in the knowledge that together we were stronger than any obstacle. Our story, which began with pain and judgment, was now a tribute to the strength we found in each other. And as the sun set on another day, I felt a deep peace, knowing that no matter what the future brought, we would be prepared. Our life was not just ours. It had become part of something bigger, a journey we began to share with the world, in the hope that it could make a difference. Holding hands under the starry sky, we knew that our mission was not just to live, but to teach others the value of understanding. And so we ended that day with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the love that united us was, and always would be, the guiding light. As time went on, our story spread, and with every event, interview, or message of support we received, we felt like we were doing something truly meaningful. Our voice had become an instrument of empathy and understanding, and the response from people was moving. Many shared their own stories of judgment and overcoming, and somehow we became part of a larger movement, one that encouraged empathy and caring for others. Then, one cold winter morning, Maya received an unexpected letter. It was from an international organization dedicated to helping people with rare conditions like hers. The letter explained that they were organizing a conference for doctors, healthcare professionals, and families dealing with similar conditions, and they wanted to invite her to speak as one of the keynote speakers. Maya read the letter silently, absorbing every word. When she finished, she looked at me with bright eyes and a smile that was a mix of excitement and nervousness. "They want me to tell our story, Pablo, to explain how we were able to turn judgment into something positive, something that inspires hope for so many people." I sat down next to her and held her hands. "You deserve this, Maya. Our story has helped so many people. And now, you will have the opportunity to take that message even further. It will be incredible." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "I know. But speaking to so many people, sharing all the details, I still feel scared, you know?" I caressed her face, knowing that this fear was part of the healing process. "I will be by your side the whole time. And remember, you have faced much harder things. You are stronger than any insecurity." Maya looked at me with a mix of gratitude and determination. And so we began to prepare the talk together, remembering each part of our journey, the moments of pain and fear, but also those of hope and overcoming. We put together a presentation that told our story in stages, from the moment we met to the peaceful days we were finally living now. On the day of the conference, the auditorium was packed. Professionals, families, and even people who had been following our story online were present. There was an energy in the air, an anticipation that filled the room. I was sitting in the front row, with our son in my lap, silently cheering as she prepared to go on stage. When Maya entered, the auditorium went silent. She began to speak, her voice soft but firm. And as she told us about her condition, about what we had been through in the hospital, and about how we had managed to get through it all with each other's support, I realized that she had a light that captivated everyone. Maya spoke from the heart, and each word seemed to touch those who listened deeply. At one point, she looked at me and smiled, and I knew that we were together in every word, in every memory. "Love and understanding," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "are the most powerful things we can offer each other." And it was love that guided us, that made us believe, even when everything seemed against us. As she finished her speech, the audience rose to their feet in a warm ovation. Maya, visibly moved, looked out at the audience, touched by everyone's reaction. I felt pride rise within me, knowing that she had found her voice, that our story had become a symbol of resilience and courage. After the talk, many people approached her to thank her, share their own stories, and say how much her message had touched them. Doctors, parents of children with rare conditions, and even people who just wanted to better understand how to support others were there, each bringing a little bit of their own story. That night, as we drove home, Maya held my hand in the car and looked at me with tears of gratitude in her eyes. "I never imagined that our suffering could turn into something so beautiful, Pablo. Everything we've been through today makes sense." I smiled, squeezing her hand. Our story was difficult, but it also made us who we are. And today, you showed the world that strength and empathy can emerge even from the greatest adversity. When we got home, we put our son to bed and, once again, sat on the porch under the starry sky, as we had so many times before. Looking up at the stars, Maya said, her voice soft and full of purpose, "Now, I know that we are exactly where we are supposed to be. And with everything we have learned, I want to continue helping others find the strength to face their own challenges." I hugged her, feeling the warmth of her words and the depth of her determination. There, under the silent glow of the stars, we realized that our story of love and overcoming was just the beginning of something much bigger. We had a mission, a purpose, and as long as we were together, we knew we could carry our message to the world, always with open hearts, ready to inspire others and to continue writing the next chapters of our own story together. The impact of the conference was even greater than we could have imagined. In the days that followed, Maya began to receive messages from people all over the world, some thanking her, others sharing their own stories of overcoming and judgment, and many asking for guidance. She began to dedicate time to responding to these people, offering words of support, and sharing what she had learned along our journey. One afternoon, as she read a particularly moving email from a mother who was dealing with the same condition as her. Maya looked at me, her expression deep in thought. "Pablo," she began, "I feel like we need to do more. There are so many people going through such difficult situations, and I feel like our story alone is no longer enough." I nodded, already intuiting what she was thinking. "You're right. Maybe it's time to turn all of this into something more concrete, something that can have a lasting impact and help." That's when the idea came to us. We decided to create a foundation to support people with rare conditions and their families, offering guidance, emotional support, and, whenever possible, resources to help them on their journey. The foundation would be more than a symbol of our story. It would be a way to give back for the help and understanding we had received, and also to transform the suffering we had experienced into something that could make a difference. Over the next few months, we worked tirelessly to get the foundation up and running. Maya used her experience to build a support network of healthcare professionals, psychologists, and volunteers willing to share their time and knowledge. I took care of the logistical aspects, organizing every detail so that we could reach as many people as possible. When we finally launched the foundation, we scheduled a simple but meaningful ceremony. Family, friends, and people who had followed our story showed up, and when I saw the space full of familiar and unfamiliar faces, I knew we were doing something truly special. Maya took the stage, holding the microphone with a confidence that had only grown since the conference. She looked out at the crowd with a serene smile, and her voice was thick with emotion as she spoke. This foundation is the fruit of a story that began amidst judgment and suffering. But what was pain has turned into purpose. My wish is that every person who goes through a diagnosis, a rare condition, or a moment of misunderstanding will find here the support that the outside world often refuses to offer. Here, we want to show that no one has to face their challenges alone. A wave of applause filled the room, and I was moved to tears as I saw so many people with tears in their eyes, touched by Maya's sincerity and strength. Then we began to welcome the first families, people who had come seeking guidance and hope. Each story we heard was unique, but they all carried the same weight of pain, and at the same time, the same search for understanding and acceptance. One of the first people to approach us was a young mother holding in her arms a small girl with the same condition as Maya. When she saw Maya, her eyes filled with tears, and she simply whispered, "Thank you for giving us hope." Maya knelt beside the little girl and gently touched her face, her smile full of tenderness. "You are not alone," she said, holding her mother's hand. "You will never be alone again." After that ceremony, our routine changed forever. We began to dedicate part of our time to the foundation, meeting people from all over the world. We went everywhere, listening to stories of struggle and overcoming that echoed our own experiences. Every face, every hug, and every word of gratitude were confirmation that our decision to transform suffering into something greater had been the right choice. At the end of each day, when we returned home, we felt fulfilled, even if we were tired. Our son was growing up in a home full of love, surrounded by stories of courage and kindness, and we knew that he, more than anyone, would learn from an early age the value of empathy and respect for others. One night, after another day of work at the foundation, Maya and I were sitting on the porch, contemplating the stars as we always did. She held my hand and, with a look full of peace, said, "Pablo, we really transformed our pain into something beautiful. This foundation is an extension of our love, of our union, and now it belongs to all those who need it." I squeezed her hand, feeling the depth of her words. It's true, Maya. I never imagined that one day we would be here, that everything we had been through would bring us to this moment. But now I know that every challenge, every tear, led us exactly where we were meant to be. We embraced, feeling each other's warmth under the night sky. Our mission was now bigger than ourselves, a mission of love and hope, a mission that gave meaning to everything we had experienced. And with hearts full of gratitude, we knew that we were finally at peace. The love that had brought us together had become something that transcended our own story. The foundation was not just our legacy, it was a promise to the world that no one would face their challenges alone. And so, day after day, we continued to build a future where compassion and love would always be the most powerful forces. Months passed since the foundation's inauguration, and our work continued to grow. Each day brought new challenges, but also new victories, new stories of people who found in our space a place of welcome and support. The foundation became more than a center for help, was a community united by the desire to transform suffering into strength and judgment into empathy. One of those days, Maya received an unexpected invitation. A renowned university wanted to honor her with an award for her contribution to the community and for creating the foundation. It was an important award given to people who dedicated their lives to humanitarian causes, and the recognition brought with it even greater visibility for our mission. When she told me, her eyes shone with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Pablo, I never imagined that one day I would receive something like this. It all started with a story full of pain, and now people see something beautiful in it, something that can really help the world. I held her hands and smiled, proud. Maya, you transformed your pain into hope for so many people. This recognition is more than deserved, and it will certainly inspire even more people to join us. We accepted the invitation, and on the day of the ceremony, we were greeted by an auditorium full of people, including colleagues, families benefiting from the foundation, health professionals, and many others who wanted to celebrate the impact of our work. When Maya took the stage, holding the award in her hands, the audience gave a standing ovation, and I felt a wave of emotion at seeing her there, radiant and self-assured. The same woman who, years before, had faced judgment and prejudice. She began to speak, her voice clear and firm, filled with deep emotion. This award is more than just recognition. It is proof that love and empathy are capable of transforming any story. A few years ago, Pablo and I went through one of the most difficult moments of our lives, and the only thing that sustained us was the support and understanding that we eventually found in a few people. But from that, we built something that now belongs to all of you. She paused, looking at the audience. I want to dedicate this award to every person who has ever suffered in silence, who has faced judgmental looks, who has gone through something that no one seemed to understand. The foundation is for you, a place where your stories are heard and respected. The audience responded with a standing ovation, and I saw tears in the eyes of many people around us. Maya came down from the stage, and when she approached me, she wrapped me in a tight hug. I knew in that moment that she was at peace with everything she had been through, and that our journey of overcoming had found its fulfillment there. That night was full of emotions, with people from all over coming up to us, sharing words of gratitude and admiration. Some told personal stories, others offered to volunteer their help. To the foundation, we were building a true support network, something much bigger than we had ever imagined. In the days that followed, the repercussion of the award brought a wave of support and resources to the foundation. More people and health professionals joined our mission, and we were able to expand our services, offering new psychological support programs, awareness-raising workshops in schools, and even an advocacy group to support families in cases of discrimination. Each new achievement was a step towards a more welcoming world. And every night, when we sat down to talk about what we had experienced that day, we felt immense gratitude for everything we had built together. One of those nights, while we were preparing dinner at home, Maya looked at me and smiled. "Pablo, I never imagined that something that started with so much suffering would turn into such a beautiful mission. Our love saved me, but now it saves so many other lives." I hugged her, feeling the warmth of her words. "Maya, every step we have taken, every tear and every challenge has brought us here, and I know we still have a lot to build." She agreed, and in that moment, I realized that our story had become a legacy. The love that had brought us together, that had sustained us through the darkest moments, was now a source of inspiration for the world. And we knew that together we could face anything, always guided by our commitment to each other and to those who looked to us for hope. As we ate dinner, with our son by our side, smiling and watching us with the curiosity of a child, I knew that the journey we had begun together would one day become the story that he would also carry forward. And so, our love, which began between trials and overcoming, continued to grow and multiply, becoming a transformative force, a promise that the world can indeed be a more welcoming and compassionate place. From that moment on, we were not just Pablo and Maya. We were a symbol of resilience, of hope, and of a love that transcends borders, inspiring generations to come. Time passed, and our foundation continued to grow, as did our purpose of helping more and more people face their struggles with courage and dignity. Our son, now older, was beginning to understand the value of the work we did, and even at such a young age, he showed signs of compassion and curiosity, always asking about the people we met and the stories we told. One sunny morning, while we were organizing a fundraiser for the foundation, I received a call from a hospital in another city. On the other end of the line, a nurse with a soft, hesitant voice explained that they were treating a young woman with the same condition as Maya, but who was alone, without any family support. They had found out about our foundation and wanted to, if we could help, since the girl was scared and needed emotional support and medical advice. As soon as I hung up, I looked at Maya, who could already tell from my expression that something serious was happening. "It's a young woman like you, Maya," I explained, trying to choose my words carefully. "She's alone and needs someone who understands what she's going through." Without hesitation, Maya nodded, a determined gleam in her eyes. "Let's go, Pablo. I know exactly what it's like to be vulnerable and scared. I can't let her go through this alone." We quickly packed our things, and a few hours later, we were on the road, leaving our son in the care of a close friend. The drive was silent, but full of meaning. Every mile we drove reminded me of what we had been through, how it had all started, and how Maya was now using her experience to be a source of comfort to others. When we arrived at the hospital, we were greeted by the medical staff, who led us to the young woman's room. As we entered, we saw a small girl with frightened eyes and shaking hands, clutching the edge of the blanket. It was impossible not to think of Maya herself, on that first day in the hospital, vulnerable and helpless. Maya approached her carefully, sitting next to the bed and holding her hand with a gentleness that only someone who had experienced such pain could offer. "Hi," she said with a soft smile. "My name is Maya, and I understand what you're going through. You're not alone, okay?" The girl stared at her with wide eyes, visibly surprised, and little by little, Her expression began to soften. Are you like me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Maya nodded. "Yes, I've been through a lot of the same things, but I'm here to help you. And together, we'll get through this." The young woman, whose name was Leticia, began to relax, feeling understood and welcomed for the first time. We spent hours talking to her, listening to her story, her insecurities and fears. Maya told us part of our journey, how we had faced trials and difficulties, but how all of this had made us stronger. During that time, I realized that the Foundation's work, our mission, was not just about providing resources and medical support. It was about something deeper. It was about giving people a sense of belonging, a feeling that they didn't have to face their struggles alone. What Maya offered Leticia was, above all, the comfort of a friendship born of shared experience, of an understanding that transcends words. In the days that followed, Maya and I helped organize the support Leticia would need, connecting her with specialists and arranging for her to receive the medical and psychological care she needed. With each visit, we saw her strength and confidence grow. Maya had become a mentor of sorts to Leticia, guiding her with the same compassion and wisdom that years before she herself had longed for. When the day came to say goodbye, Leticia hugged us with tears in her eyes, holding Maya's hand as if she didn't want to let go. "Thank you for giving me hope," she whispered, "for showing me that it is possible to be happy, even if you are different." Maya hugged her tightly, and I felt that, in that moment, she had come full circle. Everything she had suffered, everything we had faced together, now made even more sense. Our story was not just ours. It was that of every person we had touched, of every life we had encountered along the way. On the way home, the silence between us was full of peace and fulfillment. Maya looked at me and smiled, her eyes shining with emotion and pride. "Pablo, I feel like our mission will never end. There are so many Leticias out there, so many people who still need understanding and support. And I want to be there for them. I want them to know that they are not alone." I held her hand, feeling a deep admiration for her. "And we will be there, Maya, every step of the way, because our story, our mission, is bigger than ourselves." When we arrived home, we found our son waiting for us, with a smile that lit up his face. When I saw him, I knew that beyond everything we were building, our greatest legacy would be the example we were leaving for him. Our son would grow up in a home where love, compassion, and empathy were the pillars of everything. That night, as we were putting him to bed, Maya whispered in my ear, "Thank you for never giving up on me, for being by my side every step of the way." I hugged her, and looking to the future said, "This is our journey, Maya, and I wouldn't have chosen another path, another person, or another life. We started this together, and together, we will see it through." And so, our mission continued, a journey that always surprised us, that taught us to be better, to give more of ourselves. We knew that, as long as we had each other, the love and determination that united us would be the strength that would guide us, always ready to welcome those who needed a home in their hearts. Months after our meeting with Leticia, our foundation had become a true beacon for those seeking understanding and support. The stories of the people we met and helped intertwined with our own, creating a network of strength and empathy that seemed to grow with each passing day. It didn't take long for us to realize that we weren't just offering a service, but that we had created a family of souls united by the desire to overcome adversity and find deeper meaning in their journeys. One afternoon, we received an unexpected invitation. A publisher was interested in turning our story into a book. They believed that the account of our struggle, our overcoming, and the birth of the foundation could inspire even more people around the world. As we talked about the proposal, Maya looked thoughtful, a mix of apprehension and excitement crossing her face. Writing a book, telling everything from the beginning, it's a huge step, Pablo. Are we ready for it? She asked, her voice soft, but full of meaning. I held her hand, feeling the weight of the decision. Our story has already changed so many lives, Maya. Maybe it's time to take it even further, to show the world that love, even in the most difficult situations, can be the most transformative force there is. Maya nodded, her eyes reflecting the courage I have always admired. So, let's do it. Let's tell it all, not just to inspire, but so that others who are in the dark know that there is a light waiting for them. Over the next few months, we dove into the memories, revisiting each moment, the fear, the tears, the trials, and also the small victories that led us to where we were. Each chapter was a reflection of our deepest emotions, and as we wrote, we relived the pain, but also the love that sustained us throughout the journey. By the end of the process, the book was ready. It was an honest and vulnerable account that chronicled everything from our first meeting to the birth of the foundation, and culminated in the fulfillment of our mission, alongside so many other lives that had been touched. We touched on the path. We decided to call the book Entre Lazos et Cicatrices, a name that represented our story, our pain, but also the beauty of everything we had built together. On the day of the launch, we were surrounded by friends, family, and many of the people who had become part of our community. The line for autographs seemed endless, and every face I saw was a reminder of why we had decided to share our story. Many held the book with shaking hands, filled with emotion, and thanked us for opening our hearts and giving voice to their own experiences. When it was Letitia's turn, she looked at me with a shy but grateful smile. "Thank you for writing this," she said. "I would never have found my own strength if it weren't for your courage." Maya hugged her tenderly, and I knew in that moment that everything we had faced, every tear and every challenge, had been worth it. Our story now belonged to the world, a beacon of hope that we hoped would illuminate the lives of every person who read its pages. As the event progressed, I spotted our son sitting in a corner with the book in his hands. He flipped through the pages curiously, and I walked over and sat next to him. He looked at me, his eyes shining, and asked, "Daddy, is this your story?" I nodded, smiling softly. "Yes, my son. This is our story. And in a way, it is your story too, because you are part of everything we have built." He smiled, resting his head on my shoulder. "It is a beautiful story, Daddy." I hugged him, feeling a wave of emotion wash over me. "Yes, it is. And I hope that one day you will tell your own story of courage and love." The event ended, but the sense of peace and fulfillment remained. Our story, which had begun with so much suffering and judgment, was now an inspiration. The scars that we once carried with weight and pain were now part of a journey of love and resilience. That night, as we walked home, Maya and I sat on the porch, watching the stars, as we had done so many times. She held my hand, and I could see the peace in her eyes, a reflection of all that we had built together. "Pablo, I think we have finally found our purpose. Our story now belongs to everyone, and it will live on beyond us." I hugged her, feeling the warmth of her words. "Yes, Maya, our story is now a legacy, and as long as there is someone who needs hope, we will always be there, even in the words written on the pages of a book." And so our journey continued. Between Ties and Scars was not just a book, It was a promise that no matter the challenges, love and empathy would always prevail. And with hearts full of gratitude, we knew that we were exactly where we were meant to be, ready to move forward, knowing that our story, now immortalized, would be a light for anyone who needed it.